Welcome back and thank you for tuning in to Karma Nexus. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The house was too quiet. David Ramirez had just walked in from his shift, boots caked in dust, his security badge still clipped to his belt. But the moment he opened the door, a chill passed over him. Not because the heater was off, but because something was wrong. Deeply wrong. "Sophia," he called out. No response. He moved down the hallway, heart touting. The door to her room was cracked. Inside, the light flickered low. He pushed it open slowly and stopped. Sophia sat curled in the corner of her bed, her face swollen, lips split, tears drying into her hoodie. Her knees were pulled to her chest, arms trembling. He couldn't speak. "Dad," she corked, and then it came like a dam bursting. She broke into uncontrollable sobs, fist clenching her hoodie, gasping for air between screams. David rushed to her, dropped to his knees. "Baby, what happened?" he whispered, panic slicing through his chest. They hurt me," she choked out. "Three of them from school at that party." David's breath caught. Time stopped. She looked up at him, eyes hollow. They laughed. He held her tighter. His daughter, his light, his reason shattered in his arms. Rage crawled up his spine like fire. "Tell me their names," he said. Quiet, dead calm. She did one by one. As her voice broke on the last name, David didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't cry. He just whispered, "Okay." And in that silence, something inside him died. And something else, something ancient, merciless, woke up. "Before we move ahead, I just want to say your support truly means everything. We're building something special here, and our next big goal is reaching 10,000 incredible subscribers. If you're feeling the emotions in these stories, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now. Be part of this amazing journey, and let's keep growing together. Your one click can make a real difference." "Let's continue the story," they said. "What changes you?" But nothing changed David like hearing his daughter whisper. "They said no one would believe me." Sophia sat on the ER cot, shivering under a hospital blanket, the sterile smell making her nausea worse. A kind nurse tried to be gentle, but every touch made her flinch. David stood in the hallway, fists clenched, watching every person who walked by like they were a threat. His military instincts were on full alert, heart pounding, senses razor sharp. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was worse. A detective finally showed up. Mid-40s, tired eyes, soft handshake. "We'll start with a statement," he said. David's glare was enough to silence him. "You'll get more than a statement," David growled. Back home, Sophia curled up in his bed. He sat beside her. The Glock 19 he'd carried in Afghanistan, now lying on the nightstand. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked softly. "They said if I told anyone, they'd say I wanted it," she whispered. "They filmed it, said they'd send it to the whole school." David closed his eyes, then opened them. No mercy in his gaze. The next morning, he walked into the sheriff's office and handed over every piece of information. Names, addresses, timelines, a nurse's report. Sophia's torn clothing, her bruises. The sheriff skimmed the file, then looked up. "These boys got families' reputations. We'll need to handle this carefully." David's stare cut through him. "If you don't," he said, voice steady, "I will." And he walked out. No drama, no yelling, just were in his eyes. They called it just a party. A Friday night, someone's parents out of town. Music loud enough to drown conscience. Sophia had gone because her best friend insisted it would be fun, safe, just kids from school. It wasn't. They gave her a drink that tasted like cough syrup mixed with soda. Bitter. Then they laughed when she coughed and said she was too soft. They waited. They watched. And then they struck. Two of them held her arms while the third, Nathan, the sheriff's nephew, whispered, "You'll be fine. Just relax." "Don't be a baby," Sophia screamed. They turned the music up. She scratched, kicked, bit, but they were stronger. And when it was done, they all high-fived, called her names, tossed her hoodie at her like trash. She found her phone had been taken. Later, she saw one of them recording, grinning. "Smile for the camera," he said. The friend who brought her there, gone, vanished. No calls answered. She walked home at 3 a.m., blood drying on her jeans. Every step felt like glass in her bones, and when she got home, she couldn't speak. Not yet. It took until David came home the next night, set down his lunch bag, and called her name for her to break. David listened motionless. Then he stood up, went to the garage, opened the old military crate under his tool bench. Inside, field maps, flashlights, an old combat knife, still sharp. He didn't say a word, but his hands didn't shake, because a man like David doesn't break. He calculates, and now he had targets. Monday morning came like a curse. Sophia didn't want to go back to school. David didn't want her out of his sight, but she insisted through tears, trembling hands, and a forced, fractured voice. "I have to show them I'm not afraid," she said. He looked at her, hair tied back to hide the swelling, hoodie zipped to her chin. She wasn't ready, but she was brave. He kissed her forehead. "Call me if you even feel something off, you understand?" She nodded, but by third period, the whispers had already started. She was all over them, drunk. "I heard she does this for attention." One girl passed her in the hallway and muttered, "Slut." Another laughed. "If it happened, why isn't anyone arrested?" Sophia froze, back pressed against the locker, knuckles white. Her body felt hot and cold at once. A teacher walked by, glanced, then kept going. No one said anything. No one helped. By the time she got to lunch, her tray trembled in her hands. As she sat, a phone slid across the table in front of her. It was a blurry video, low quality, shaky, but unmistakable. Her screams, their laughter, her eyes widened. She pushed the tray away, ran to the bathroom, and locked herself in a stall, shaking. Back home, David waited by the window, chewing on the inside of his cheek, phone clutched in his hand. She didn't call, but when he picked her up, she climbed into the passenger seat and said just 4 words. "They're still laughing, Dad." He didn't answer, just started the car. His face was stone. That night, while Sophia slept, David sat at the kitchen table and wrote their names on paper. Nathan Greaves, Tyler Morgan, Josh Raines. Beside each, he wrote one word, dead. But not yet, soon. The first one was Tyler Morgan, son of Carl Morgan, local contractor, poker buddy of the sheriff, quarterback, dimpled smile, the kind of kid grown-ups call a charmer. David parked 2 blocks away from the Morgans' house and watched from the shadows. Tyler left every evening at 7:30 to hit the gym, always alone, no security, same hoodie, same earbuds, predictable. The second, Josh Raines, slippery, lived with his mother in a rundown duplex near the train tracks. Loner type, he was the cameraman, the one who posted the video. David had traced the IP address. The third, Nathan Greaves, the ringleader, blonde hair, fake smile, politician in training. His dad, Sheriff Alan Greaves, the most powerful man in town. Nathan drove a black Mustang with custom plates. GRVZ1. Arrogant, invincible. David studied them all. For days, he kept notes, recorded patterns, took photos from rooftops, alleys, abandoned buildings. This wasn't rage anymore. It was reconnaissance. At night, he'd clean the same Glock he hadn't used in years. Not for intimidation, for closure. 1 bullet each, but bullets were loud, messy. David wanted control. He thought about the sounds Sophia made when she said their names. Not anger, not even hate, just fear. Fear that had no place in his daughter's soul. And that's when he made a decision. They wouldn't just die. They would know. They would feel it coming. And they would know why. No courtroom, no trial, just one man, one father delivering a verdict. David's boots echoed in the sheriff's department lobby like war drums. The receptionist smiled. "You here to see Alan?" He didn't respond. The sheriff's office was upstairs, corner room, leather chair, framed photo of him with the governor. David walked in without knocking. Alan looked up, surprised. "Well, I'll be damned. Ramirez, haven't seen you since that fundraiser." "House? My daughter was raped," David said. Silence. Alan blinked. "What? By your son and 2 of his friends?" At that party Friday night, Alan's face changed. The smile dropped. His jaw tightened. "David, you can't just come in here throwing accusations." "I'm not throwing anything. I'm handing you a case. Hospital report. Video evidence. Witness statement. You've got a predator in your home." Alan stood slowly, eyes cold. "Nathan says she came on to them and that no one forced anything." David stepped forward, inches away. "She was drugged." "You have proof of that," Alan snapped. David didn't flinch. "I have bruises on my daughter's body, tears in her skin, screams on video." Alan exhaled through his nose. "I'll assign someone." Quietly. "Let's not blow this up unless we have to." David stared at him for a long moment, then said, "That was the wrong answer." He turned and left, walking out as the door slammed behind him. In the hallway, He passed 2 officers who nodded politely. He didn't nod back, he didn't smile. He just walked out, hands at his sides like a man preparing for a war no one else could see coming. The school didn't call David, Sophia did. Her voice was soft but shaking. They pulled me into the office, said I was disrupting the environment. By the time he arrived, Sophia was already sitting outside the principal's office, backstaff, hands clenched in her lap. Inside, Principal Levinson leaned forward across the desk like he was delivering some gentle favor. "Mr. Ramirez, your daughter's accusation has caused quite a stir. We've had parents calling. Allegations like this, they need to be handled with discretion." David stared at him. Levinson continued. "Now we've reviewed footage from the school hallways. The boys appear calm, polite. We have no reason to assume they've done anything." "She was raped," David said flatly. The principal shifted uncomfortably again. "We're not investigators, we're educators. Unless the police file charges," David leaned forward slowly, voice like iron. "If you tell her she's lying again, I'll rip the desk out of the floor and feed it to you." Levinson paled. Back in the parking lot, Sophia sat in the car, quiet. "They made me feel like I did something wrong." David didn't answer. He just reached across the seat and took her hand. She squeezed his fingers tight. At home that night, David walked into the garage, opened his safe, and laid out everything he needed. Gloves, duct tape, flashlight, a portable voice recorder. He stared at it all, then clicked record. "This is David Ramirez. I'm documenting what I'm about to do. Not for forgiveness, not for sympathy, but for the truth." He paused. His voice cracked just slightly. "They broke my daughter, and no one's coming to fix her." David had always taken pride in his hands. They weren't soft. They were calloused, strong, shaped by years of building, repairing, surviving. They carried rifles in Fallujah, lifted Sophia when she scraped her knees, built her a treehouse with a busted thumb, and 3 nails too many. But now they trembled. He stood in front of the mirror holding a combat knife, not because he planned to use it, but because he had to remember who he used to be, who he had to become again. He practiced wrapping rope, tying fast knots in the dark, practiced moving silently across the kitchen tiles, practiced patience. At 3 a.m., he snuck into the shed and removed a faded duffel bag he hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside, zip ties, a broken Motorola radio, dog tags, and a black bandana still smelling faintly of sand and sweat. He wrapped it around his wrist like a ritual. This wasn't rage anymore. This was discipline control. He watched Tyler's house from a block away, night after night. Tyler's routine was boring, lazy, unguarded. He jogged every Tuesday night through the bike trail behind the high school. No cameras, no traffic, no lights. David waited, and when the time came, he'd use these hands not just to hurt, but to teach. Because what they'd done wasn't just a crime, it was a declaration of war, and David had always been good at war. David had expected justice to be slow. He hadn't expected it to evaporate. The hospital forwarded their report to the police. A week passed, nothing, then another. Then a voicemail from the detective assigned. "We're reviewing the evidence, but the chain of custody on the phone video isn't strong. Don't lose hope. Don't lose hope." David crushed the phone in his hand. He visited the DA's office next. Spoke to a junior assistant who promised to look into it. She never called back. 3 days later, David sat in his truck outside the county courthouse and watched Nathan walk out with his father, laughing, eating ice cream. Sophia hadn't smiled in 2 weeks. Inside the truck, David gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned white. The system wasn't broken. It was rigged, built to protect the sons of sheriffs and judges, built to silence girls like Sophia. David opened the glove box, pulled out a stack of printed screenshots, the boys' profiles, their posts. One even captioned, "When she says stop, but you're already halfway there." He looked at the words, felt the bile rise in his throat. He pulled out a red marker and crossed out each name, then drew a target. That night, he pulled out a burner phone, sent a message to a number he'd written months ago, but never used. "Need help? Tactical supplies. Quiet." A reply came instantly. "Got you." David stared out the window at the dark trees. The system may have fallen silent, but he was just getting started. David hadn't slept in 2 nights. He sat on the hood of his old fort, parked at the edge of Black Ridge Lake just before dawn. A thermos of black coffee steamed beside him. The gun sat on the passenger seat, untouched, unloaded for now. The water shimmered, still and silent, like it didn't know the kind of evil the world carried. In his hands, he held a photo. Sophia, 6 years old, in a red dress covered in spaghetti stains. That night, she'd cried because her favorite crayon broke. He'd held her for hours, telling her the world wasn't as scary as it looked. He'd lied. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the photo. "I should have protected you better." The sky began to bleed orange. He stared into it, expression blank. "I came back from war because of her. I walked through hell to be her dad," and then his voice cracked. He picked up the gun, loaded it, then set it back down. "I won't shoot them in rage. Not with anger. I'll do it with purpose, with clarity, so they understand, so they feel it. Because this sunrise wasn't just a morning. It was a farewell, the last morning he would wake up a citizen. From now on, he wasn't a father, he was an executioner in waiting. Back at home, the garage became something else. Not a place for tools or weekend projects. It became his war room. Blueprints, maps, street views, time-its. He pinned up their routines, photos, schedules, weaknesses, registering connected faces. Arrows pointed to escape routes, tactical entries, blind spots. It wasn't chaos, it was art. He replayed the video again. Not all of it, just the laughter, just the frame that caught Nathan's smirk. That was enough. He burned the rest. David ordered gear through dark channels, non-lethal equipment, restraints, blackout goggles, high-grade rope. He wasn't going in with a gun unless he had to. He wanted them to see him. He wanted them to know who was there. He relearned their rhythms. Tyler always left the gym at 8:20. Jogged down Westfield Trail, always took out his AirPods near the curve by the woods. Josh smoked behind the train station after school, always alone, hoodie up, hoodie down, glancing at his phone like he expected followers to keep him safe. Nathan untouchable, surrounded by people, but patterns have cracks. And David had all the time in the world. He practiced his movements, how to disarm, disable, subdue. He wasn't looking for blood splatter, he was looking for fear. He started voice recording everything. Not for evidence, not for justice, but for Sophia. Because one day she deserved to know the truth. Not the silence the world offered her. "Now, step 1, he said into the recorder, staring at Tyler's face pinned on the wall, "is tonight." The street lamps buzzed overhead like dying insects. David's truck was parked half a block away from Westfield Trail. Engine off, windows down just enough to let the spring air in, black gloves on, bandana in his pocket, eyes sharp. At 8:23, he saw Tyler jogging like clockwork, gray hoodie, sleeveless, arrogance in his stride. David slipped out, silent. Tyler turned the corner into the wooded trail, popped his earbuds back in, never looked back. Perfect. David moved behind him like a shadow. Fast, controlled, no wasted motion. At the halfway bend, where the trees thickened and the world went quiet, he struck, one hand over Tyler's mouth, one swift arm around his throat, not to choke, just to control. He slammed Tyler to the ground, duct tape over the mouth, zip tie on the wrists. Tyler's eyes bulged. He thrashed once. David slammed a knee into his ribs. Sure, he pulled a voice recorder from his pocket, clicked it on, held it close to the boy's face. "You know who I am." Tyler shook his head. "You know what you did." Tyler's eyes flicked, terrified, recognition dawning. "I should kill you," David said. "But I want you to live. I want you to wake up every night wondering if I'm coming back. I want you to feel what my daughter feels. That terror, that helplessness." He leaned closer, whispered, "You earned it." Then he slid a flash drive into Tyler's pocket. "Give this to your daddy. If it disappears, if you try to erase it, I come back and next time I bring the dark with me." David vanished into the trees before Tyler could scream. The next morning, every parent in town received an anonymous email. No words, just the video, just Sophia's scream. Tyler didn't speak for 2 days. He showed up at the ER bruised and pale tape marks still fresh on his face. When asked what happened, he lied, mugging random guy. But the moment his father, Carl Morgan, saw the flash drive, things changed. He plugged it into his laptop and palled instantly. Video, audio, confession, Sophia's voice. Screams, laughter, Tyler's voice saying, "Make her shut up." Carl slammed the laptop shut and grabbed his son by the collar. "What the hell did you do?" Tyler stammered. "I didn't. I mean, it wasn't like that, Dad. We were just, you filmed it? Are you out of your goddamn mind?" Tyler said nothing. That night, Carl paid a quiet visit to the sheriff's house. A scotch in hand, voice low. "Urgent, we've got a problem." Nathan sat in the living room, headphones on, scrolling TikTok like he didn't have a care in the world. Sheriff Greaves just nodded. "We'll handle it." By morning, the town's private server had been scrubbed. The school email accounts were locked, but it was too late. One teacher had already seen it. One parent had already saved it. David watched it all unfold from the shadows, just as he planned. Rumors spread. Parents whispered at pickup lines. The town felt the crack, but the authorities still hadn't acted. No arrests, no statements, only silence, just like always. So David turned the page on his war journal. Target 2, Josh Raines, the cameraman, the coward, the one who hid behind the lens while others inflicted the damage and still smiled about it. Josh lived in the kind of house that sagged with neglect. Rotting gutters, cigarette butts littering the porch, a front door with duct tape over the lock. His mom was barely present. Nights were loud, days were worse. He didn't go to the gym, didn't run track. Josh just sculpted, quiet, greasy, always watching. David had him clocked. After school, Josh always snuck out behind the abandoned rail yard, smoked half a joint, checked his phone obsessively, and wandered home through a dead alley that no one used anymore. David waited 3 days, studied the route, timed it. On the 4th day, just as dusk painted the sky blood orange, Josh turned down the alley like always. Hoodie on, head down, David struck fast. A grip to the back of the neck, a punch to the side. Josh collapsed with a gasp. Before he could scream, David had duct tape across his mouth and his back against the wall. He didn't speak at first. He played the video instead. Right there on his phone, full volume. Josh's eyes widened in horror. David leaned in. "You watched her bleed." Josh whimpered behind the tape. "You could have stopped them, but you kept rolling." He pulled the tape away. Josh sobbed. "I didn't touch her. It was them. You filmed it. You laughed. That makes you worse." Josh tried to crawl away. David pulled him back, slammed a photo in his face. Sophia's hospital chart. "See this? That's her blood. Her broken wrist. The torn tissue your friends left behind." Josh's tears fell fast now. "I didn't mean to. You meant to capture it, share it, immortalize her pain." David didn't hit him again. He made him listen every scream, every second of that video. Then he shoved a thumb drive into Josh's backpack. "Deliver this to the school board anonymously. No edits. If it doesn't show up by tomorrow, I'll be back and you won't walk away this time." Then he vanished into the night like smoke. The school was chaos the next morning. Every hallway buzzed like a hive on fire. Teachers huddled in whispers. Students passed around phones under desks. By second period, a third of the student body had seen the footage. There were no denials anymore, no rumors, only horror. Sophia walked through the hall like a ghost, every pair of eyes either avoiding her or burning with guilt. Her hands were cold, her throat tight, but she walked with her chin just a little higher because finally they believed her. Not because she told them, because they heard it themselves. At lunch, a girl named Mia, who'd ignored her for weeks, sat beside her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, eyes wet. I didn't know it was real." Sophia didn't answer. She didn't need to. 2 tables over, Josh Raines sat shaking, pale as death, head down. Tyler wasn't in school at all. But Nathan walked in like nothing had changed. Headphones on, backpack slung, smirk in place, untouchable, unbothered. He passed Sophia in the hall, slowed down just a second, and muttered under his breath, "Guess who got tired of begging, huh?" Sophia flinched. Her eyes welled up again. He laughed, quiet, cruel, and kept walking. She didn't cry this time. She just whispered to herself, "Dad's going to kill you." That evening, David heard the full story from her lips, every word. And when she finished, he didn't shout, didn't curse. He walked into the garage, opened the safe again, and stared at the final folder pinned to the wall. Nathan Greaves below it in thick red ink. No mercy. The night air felt heavier than usual. David sat at the cemetery's edge, the black sky above him cracked with stars. In front of him, an old granite headstone, worn and softened by time. Elena Ramirez, beloved wife, fierce spirit, gone too soon. He lit a candle, placed it beside the fresh lies he brought every week, no matter what. Sophia used to come with him. Not anymore. Not since the night she shattered in his arms. He leaned back on his heels. "I'm going to do something, Lena." His voice was hoarse, low, like it hadn't been used in days. "I don't know if you'd forgive me for it, but I have to." He paused. They protected him. All of them. Even after the truth came out, they still protected him. And he's still laughing, still breathing like nothing happened. A breeze passed, cold. I want to believe in mercy, but I see Sophia's eyes every night. I see what they took from her, and Mercy doesn't live here anymore. He pulled out the old chain with his dog tags, slipped it off his neck, laid it gently on the grass. I promised you I'd never go back to the man I was in the war. He stood slowly. I'm breaking the promise tonight. And then he walked away, back into the dark, not looking back once. Nathan Greaves lived like royalty. Big house, private gate, home security system David had already bypassed. The sheriff always worked late Thursdays. The mother out of town at a spa retreat. Nathan would be alone. That night at 2:07 a.m., David breached the back in trance like a ghost, gloves on, hood tight, quiet as breath. Inside, the living room glowed dimly with television static. Nathan was sprawled on the couch, asleep, a bag of chips in his lap. David stood over him, watching. No pity, no hesitation. He pressed a cloth over Nathan's mouth. Drugged, measured, clean. Nathan's eyes fluttered open just long enough to catch David's face in the dark. Wah! Then everything went black. He woke up tied to a chair, mouth gagged, arms secured. A spotlight burned into his eyes. David stepped into view. Calm, focused, dressed in black from head to toe. He pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen. The video began to play. Nathan tried to twist away, but the restraints held. David spoke, voice flat. You laughed while she cried. Do you remember that? Nathan thrashed, muffled protests. Do you remember holding her down? Calling her names? David crouched eye level. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for clarity, so you never forget what you did. He played it again. Then again. Then again. Nathan sobbed behind the gag. David leaned close. You think because of your father, you're safe. But the law doesn't work out here. He stood and walked toward the front door. Oh, and one more thing. Your dad. He'll be getting a copy of this by morning along with every media outlet in the state. He paused. You've got about 4 hours before the world sees who you really are. And then he disappeared into the night. Sheriff Alan Greaves found the envelope at 5:46 a.m., plain Manila, no return address, inside a flash drive. He plugged it into his laptop expecting a threat. What he got was proof. Crystal clear, multiple angles, a timeline breakdown, audio recordings, Nathan Greaves, Tyler Morgan, Josh Raines. A narrator's voice. David's voice spoke in the background. 3 predators, 3 cowards. This is what they did to my daughter. The sheriff's face went pale. He stopped the video halfway through and picked up his phone, but he didn't dial 911. He called the judge, then the superintendent, then the mayor. All of them said the same thing. We can't cover this up anymore. At 8:32 a.m., the file was leaked. Not just to the police, to every student, every parent, every teacher. By noon, the school shut down for safety. News vans lined up outside the sheriff's office. Nathan was nowhere to be seen. And David, he watched it unfold from a rooftop 2 blocks away. Headset on, scanner tuned in to police chatter. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just exhaled like the first breath after being buried alive. Because justice didn't knock. It broke down the door and burned the house to the ground. By sunset, Cold Creek felt like it was on trial. Local news anchors stood outside the courthouse, reciting details no one ever thought would reach the public. Headlines crawled across every screen. Sheriff's son named in viral assault video. Town-wide cover-up unravels. Father's revenge exposes deep rot. At school, half the staff walked out. Parents stormed the district office demanding resignations. Students once silent held signs in front of the gates. We believe her. No more shame. And in the center of it all, Sophia sat in the nurse's office, trembling. Not from fear, from clarity. They know now, she whispered to the nurse. They finally know. The nurse, an older woman with gentle eyes, took her hand. I never believed them. I always believed you. Sophia burst into tears, but this time, they didn't feel like drowning. They felt like breathing again. Meanwhile, inside the sheriff's department, Alan Greaves stood frozen as 2 internal affairs agents walked into his office. They didn't knock. Sheriff Greaves once said, flashing a badge, "You're being placed under federal investigation for obstruction, misconduct, and evidence tampering." Alan didn't resist. He just sat down, staring blankly at his framed photo with the governor. In a single day, the empire they built collapsed like rotted wood. And still, no one knew where David Ramirez was. But he was watching. Every frame of footage, every interview, every tear. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a legend. The interrogation room was cold. Sheriff Alan Greaves sat across from two federal agents, sweat soaking through his collar. "You understand obstruction carries a minimum 5 years, right?" Agent Monroe asked, voice flat. "And that's without factoring in your son's video, which you buried." Alan wiped his forehead. "I was trying to protect him." "From what?" the second agent snapped. "Consequences? I didn't know it went that far." Monroe slid a printout across the table. Nathan's smirk. The free frame where he laughed into the lens as Sophia screamed off-screen. "You knew exactly how far it went." Alan looked away. "I wanted to handle it internally, quietly, for the families, for the town." "No," Monroe said. "You did it for your name, for your seat, for your ego." He didn't answer. The second agent pulled out another folder. "We have reports of other suppressed complaints. Girls who came forward over the past 6 years, all mishandled. Won't talk about those, too." Alan's face went white. "I need a lawyer." "Too late for that," Monroe said. "This is federal now." He slumped back in his chair. Outside, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Camera flashes like lightning in a summer storm. Nathan Greaves was escorted out of the back by 2 plainclothes agents. His hoodie was up, but his face visible. Sophia watched it happen from home, news playing on mute, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. David stood in the shadows of an old train station on the edge of town, watching the chaos unfold from his burner phone. Headline after headline, arrest after arrest. And in the silence, he whispered, it wasn't enough. Justice was cracking through, but part of him couldn't stop thinking about the others. The girls who never got their day, the fathers who stayed silent, the truth buried deeper than anyone realized. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered, expecting silence. Instead, a calm, sharp voice. "A woman, I've been following your work." David tensed. "Who is this?" "My name's Monroe, FBI, the same one who just took your friend Alan into custody. We've been watching this town for a while. Your actions pushed the needle. I didn't do it for you, I know. That's why it worked." She paused. "We want to meet. We want to talk about everything." "What? You know? What you've done?" David stayed silent. "You're not in trouble, David. You forced open a door we couldn't touch from the inside. What's the catch?" "There isn't one. You get to walk away, clean. But first, you finish what you started." David hung up. Not out of fear, but because he wasn't finished yet. He turned toward the train tracks, the wind pulling at his hoodie. Justice was crawling out of the dirt, but it needed a final push, and he was ready to give it. The envelope was waiting when David returned to the safe house. No stamp, no return address, just his name scrolled in thick black ink. Inside a USB drive, a folded photo and a single typed sentence. Sophia wasn't the first. "Look deeper." David stared at the photo for a long time. It was grainy. Clearly is still from surveillance. A girl, maybe 14, being helped into a car. Her arms limp, face bruised. Not Sophia, someone else. He plugged the USB into his laptop. The screen flickered, then opened to a file structure with dozens of folders. Each one was named after a girl. Each folder contained evidence, photos, logs, video fragments, audio, notes, each one telling the same story: drugged, assaulted, silenced. David's hands trembled, not with fear, but fury. This wasn't 3 boys making a mistake. This was a system, a pattern, and someone had been keeping records. There were notes linked to Judge Franklin, to the mayor's office, to Sheriff Greaves himself. Payments, threats, expulsions reversed, files lost, parents bribed, victims bullied out of town. He opened a video file dated 5 years ago. Another girl, blurred face, sobbing into the camera. "I told them what he did and they expelled me, said I was disturbing the peace." David leaned back. What he'd done so far, it wasn't revenge, it was just a first shot. Now it was a war. David made a secure call. He didn't say hello. "Just how long have you been tracking this?" Monroe's voice was steady. 6 years, and you let it go on. We couldn't get inside. Everything we had got shut down from the top. Judges sealed the records. Witnesses vanished. Our evidence kept getting wiped. "So, you watched them ruin these girls?" "We didn't stop it, but we didn't forget you. You broke the wall." David didn't respond. Monroe continued. "That file you received, we've been building it quietly, piece by piece, but we needed someone who couldn't be bought, couldn't be silenced. That's you." "I didn't ask for this," David growled. "No, But you answered it. She paused. There's a meeting tomorrow. Secret. Off record. Town officials. They're planning damage control. We want you there. You want me to watch them cover their tracks? No, Monroe said. We want you to blow it up from the inside. David stared at the screen. Still open, still filled with those names. Girls like Sophia, forgotten, abandoned. Not anymore. I'll be there, he said. The next morning, Sophia found her father sitting at the kitchen table, unshaved, pale, exhausted, but calm. He slid a plate toward her, toast, eggs, the way she liked. She hesitated, then sat down slowly. They ate in silence for several minutes. Then Sophia spoke barely above a whisper. Is it over? David looked up at her. No. Her eyes widened, but he wasn't finished. It's bigger than I thought. They've been doing this for years. Not just to you. Sophia looked down at her fork. I thought I was alone. David reached across the table, placed his hand over hers. You were never alone. You'll never be again, she nodded slowly. And then for the first time in what felt like years, she smiled. Soft, small, but real. You scared them, she whispered. That's not enough, he said. You shook them. That made him pause. Maybe she was right, but fear wasn't justice. Not yet. She stood and hugged him from behind. Whatever you do next, just come home. He closed his eyes and for a moment the soldier in him quieted, but not for long, because tonight he would walk into a room full of liars and monsters. And he wouldn't walk out empty-handed. The room was too clean. Wood-paneled walls, a polished conference table, bottled water neatly lined, 10 men and women in suits, faces tight with fake professionalism. This wasn't a meeting, it was a cover-up. David sat in the back corner, invited as a concerned citizen. He wore a pressed shirt, clean shave, quiet eyes. But beneath the table, his fists were clenched. Mayor Douglas opened the meeting. Let's be honest. What's done is done. We can't undo the past. We focus on stability. Judge Franklin nodded. We'll spin it. The boys were reckless. Yes, but underage. We'll offer community service, counseling, public apology. David didn't blink. Then the school's superintendent chimed in. We leaked that the father, Ramirez, used force, that his actions endangered students. We shift the focus. Shift the focus. David leaned forward. You want to make the story about me? About the father who protected his daughter? They froze. The mayor cleared his throat. We understand this is emotional for you. Don't. David cut in, his voice like stone. Don't talk to me like this is politics. You let them do this. You covered it up and now you want to blame the only person who stood up. Monroe stepped forward from the wall. Until now she'd stayed silent. She dropped a folder onto the table. Dozens of affidavit, sealed files, names. All of these were suppressed. She said, we have girls who were paid off, parents threatened, officers transferred quietly. This room isn't for solutions. It's for survival. David stood. You're not surviving this. He walked out without waiting for a response. Because the next move wasn't in that room. It was in the past. And someone was still hiding a truth he hadn't faced yet. That night, David returned home to find an unmarked envelope tucked under the door. He opened it slowly. Inside a photo, Sophia, but younger, maybe 9 years old. At school, standing next to a man David didn't recognize, a guidance counselor named Henry Casey's. On the back of the photo, you missed it once. A jolt hit David's chest. He tore through the rest of the envelope. More photos, documents, a counselor transfer request, a complaint letter, unsubmitted, a shaky letter written by Elena, Sophia's mother. David, there's something wrong with Mr. Case. Sophia won't say it, but she flinches when he's around. I think something happened. Dated 6 years ago, 2 months before Elena died, David fell to his knees. He remembered brushing it off. She's being dramatic, he'd said at the time. Don't stress her out. But Elena knew. She tried to tell him, and he didn't listen. He dropped the envelope on the floor like it burned. Was Sophia's pain deeper than even he realized? Did it start long before Nathan grieves? David walked to the kitchen, gripped the edge of the sink, and stared at his reflection. The rage he'd been directing at the world. Had it blinded him from his own guilt? He had to ask her, even if it broke him. Sophia sat on the back porch, knees tucked under her chin, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands. David stepped out quietly. He sat beside her but didn't speak, just waited. After a while, she asked, Did you always know? He looked over. No. What? That it wasn't just the party? That it wasn't the first time something happened to me? David's breath caught. She didn't look at him, just kept staring out at the backyard. I never told you because you were already broken after Mom and I didn't want to break you more. He swallowed hard. Mr. Case, he asked quietly. She nodded. I didn't remember everything. Not right away, but sometimes when I'm in the shower, I feel it. His hands, his voice, that smell. David closed his eyes. I should have seen it. You were doing your best, she said. You made me feel safe, even when I wasn't. That matters. He shook his head. It's not enough. It was to me. Silence. Then she reached into her hoodie pocket and handed him a crumpled old drawing. Stick figures. A girl with a sad face. A tall man standing beside her. Red lines. I drew this after it happened, she whispered, but no one saw it. David held the paper with trembling hands. He'd missed it, but now he wouldn't miss anything. He stood and his voice didn't shake this time. Where is Henry Casey's now? David didn't sleep. He sat at his laptop, the flicker of the screen dancing across his face, eyes locked on one name. Henry Casey's, former school counselor. Quiet, polite, a model employee on paper. Left Cold Creek 6 years ago. Family relocation, the record claimed. But Monroe had ways of finding what public records didn't show. David typed faster, heart thudding. 2014, Cold Creek Elementary. 2015, transferred to Ashton Falls Middle School. 2017. 2. Undisclosed parent complaints. 2018, suspended, quietly reinstated. 2019, moved to Fairview, New Mexico, working in youth support services. Another school, another town. David sat back. The same pattern, a predator hiding in plain sight, protected by the same system that tried to bury Sophia's pain. This wasn't a man, this was a disease. He messaged Monroe, found him, Fairview working under a new name, Harry Caseen. Her reply came fast. We'll handle it through legal. David didn't wait for the rest. He packed a duffel bag, loaded the truck, and stood at Sophia's door. She opened it, sleepy but alert. Where are you going? She asked softly. He paused to fix something I should have fixed a long time ago. Come back, she whispered. He hugged her tight. I will. Then he drove into the night, headlights slicing through the dark like a man cutting his way through his own past. Fairview wasn't special. A dusty, sun-bleached town tucked between forgotten highways. Strip malls, run-down motel, a diner that hadn't changed since '85. David pulled up outside a red brick building labeled Fairview Youth Wellness Center. Inside, it smelled of lemon cleaner and cheap paint. The receptionist smiled. Can I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Caseen, David said, voice calm but unreadable. He's with a student right now. Can I? I'll wait. She hesitated, but something in his stare made her nod. 15 minutes later, Henry Casey's walked into the lobby, thinner than before, grayer. But the eyes, those quiet, predatory eyes, they hadn't changed. He froze mid-step. David stood. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Henry offered a smile that didn't reach his face. Can I help you? David didn't smile back. I'm Sofia Ramirez's father. Henry's face twitched, just a flicker, then stillness. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. David stepped closer. I never forget faces, especially the ones my daughter still sees in her nightmares. The receptionist glanced over, uneasy. Henry forced a laugh. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You had your hands on a little girl, David said, voice low and even, and now you work with more. I've done nothing wrong, Henry snapped. David leaned in inches away. You blinked when I said her name. That's all I needed to see. Then he walked out. Not because he was finished, but because this time he wanted the whole damn world watching when the curtain dropped. That night David stayed in a roadside motel. One bed, one lamp, one purpose. He opened his laptop and started speaking into the recorder. This is for Sophia, for me, for every father who didn't see it in time. He uploaded every file Monroe had gathered on Henry Case. Victim statements, photos, school records, HR cover-ups, and compiled them into a single exposé. He attached it to an email titled, The Real Face of Henry Case Recipient. Every school board, every parent-teacher group, every media outlet within a 100-mile radius. Then he pressed send. He sat back exhausted. But it wasn't over. Just as he shut the laptop, there was a knock at the motel door. He grabbed his gun, opened it, and there he was, Henry Case. No suit, no mask, just fury behind glasses. You think you can ruin me? He hissed. You think I won't fight back? David stepped forward. You already lost. Henry lunged, fist flying. clumsy, panicked. David ducked, grabbed his wrist, twisted him to the ground. I should kill you, he growled. Henry wheezed. Go ahead, you'll go to prison. David's eyes didn't blink. I'm not afraid of prison. I walked through war, but I won't give you an easy out. He grabbed Henry's phone, unlocked it with his finger, opened his photo app, dozens of folders, private, hidden, coded. David took pictures of them all. Then he stood. You're going to confess on video, on record, or I will let every father in this state know who you are. Henry coughed. You can't make me talk. David looked down. No, he said. But fear can. And for the first time, Henry Case looked scared. The room was silent except for the hum of the old ceiling fan. David hit the record button on his phone and laid it on the motel table. Across from him sat Henry Case, wrist trembling, face pale. The predator mask was gone. In its place, a man who realized the shadows no longer protected him. You're going to speak, David said, voice steady. Not for me, for every girl you silenced. Henry stared at the phone like it was a gun. I want a lawyer. No, David snapped. You want control. That's what this was always about. He leaned in. You took something from my daughter you didn't deserve. Now you're going to give her something back. The truth. Henry's hands twitched on the table. David waited. Slow, silent, unblinking. Finally, Henry cracked voice. Slow, shaking. He began. I worked at Cold Creek Elementary from 2014 to 2016. During the time, there were incidents. I crossed boundaries with students. How many? David demanded. 3 that I remember, maybe more. David's jaw clenched. And Sophia? Henry hesitated. Yes, her too. The words landed like bullets. David closed his eyes for a second. Let the fire pass through him, but not consume him. He pressed stop and then he uploaded the file. It would go everywhere. Let the world hear it. Let them feel it. Henry Case's voice cracking under the weight of his sins. It didn't take long. Within hours of the confession leaking online, social media exploded. Hashtag spread like wildfire. Hashtag Sophia was right. Expose Henry Case. Hashtag justice for our daughters. News vans parked outside the motel. Protesters gathered at Fairview's youth center. Angry parents demanded answers. Former victims came forward, emboldened by the tape. And David, he sat in the truck watching it all unfold from a distance. He didn't smile. He didn't cry, he just breathed. Henry was taken into protective custody by local police, but even they looked at him with disgust. A local news anchor broke it live. In a shocking turn of events, Henry Case, a former school counselor, confessed on audio to multiple assaults against minors. He is currently being held while federal agencies review suppressed complaints tied to other districts. Sophia watched the clip from the living room. She didn't say a word, just reached for her sketchpad. She drew her father standing in front of a fire holding a girl's hand with wolves behind them. She titled it, You Didn't Let Go. David's burner phone lit up. Monroe again. Congratulations, she said. You just did what 6 years of federal investigation couldn't. I didn't do it for congratulations, he replied. I know, but what you did do is force this entire state to reckon with the truth. We've got statements pouring in. Parents, victims, even 2 former teachers. Keep going, David said. Don't stop. We won't. She hesitated. There's one more thing. What? We think the file you were sent, the one with the girls? That wasn't just evidence. It was bait. David's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? It was sent by someone inside. Someone who wants to burn this whole network down, but couldn't do it alone. We're trying to trace them. You think it's someone from Cold Creek? I think it's someone who knows exactly how far this went. Someone powerful. David leaned back, thinking, what happens now? He asked. Monroe's voice dropped. You go home, you rest and you get ready, because this isn't over. He hung up, the silence in the room stretching like a fuse waiting to ignite. The sun was setting when David finally pulled into the driveway. Sophia was on the porch, hoodie sleeves rolled up, sketchpad on her lap. When she saw him, she didn't run, she just stood. He walked up the steps, unsure what to say, but Sophia broke the silence. You did it, she whispered. David shook his head. No, we did. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time in weeks, her body didn't flinch when she touched someone. She held him like a lifeline, like he'd pulled her from the deepest ocean. I remember more now, she whispered. About before, about what happened. It's like my mind isn't hiding it anymore. He pulled back gently. You don't have to force it. I know, but I'm not afraid of it now. She looked into his eyes. I'm not afraid because you never stopped. David's eyes burned, but no tears fell, just a nod. Just the weight of something heavy finally being set down. Inside the house, the news still played, but for a few minutes, it didn't matter. They were home together, unbroken. David's inbox chimed. Another anonymous message. No subject, just a single sentence. The real route sits at the top. Follow the money. Attached a document. Financial statements. Shell company names. Payment logs that snake through foundations, school grants, and political campaign contributions. And at the center, Judge Martin Franklin. The same man who'd ruled on Cold Creek cases for a decade. The same man who dismissed evidence. The same man Monroe once told him was too clean to touch. David printed every page. Called Monroe. You were wrong, he said. The judge isn't just part of the problem, he's the one feeding it. Monroe's voice was tight. If that's true, we're about to stir a hornet's nest. Then get ready to run, David replied, because I'm about to tear it wide open. He sent the files to 3 independent journalists, the Federal Oversight Committee, and a watchdog group based in D.C. But before he could close the laptop, another message came in. He knows you're coming. The game had changed, and David knew the snake was starting to coil. That night, a knock echoed on David's front door. He opened it slowly, gun at his side. Standing there dressed in a cheap coat sunken, was someone David didn't expect. Detective Carl Hayes. The same officer who'd brushed off Sophia's case months ago. What do you want? David snapped. Carl looked down ashamed. I came to help. Little late for that. Carl reached into his coat and handed over a thumb drive. I kept copies from the original case before they told me to delete them. David hesitated, took the drive. Why now? He asked. Carl's voice cracked. Because I have a daughter, 10 years old. And last night she asked me, Daddy, would you believe me if I told you something scary? David stared at him. Carl continued. I've spent my whole career doing what I was told. But when I saw that video of Sophia, I couldn't sleep. David stepped aside. You've got 5 minutes. Say everything. Inside, Carl spilled everything. Secret emails, judge tampering, off their court orders from griefs, even a backdoor fund called Community Harmony that redirected grant money to silence victims. By the time he left, David had what he needed. Not just the evidence, but someone from inside. A crack in the wall, and it was widening fast. The next morning, Judge Franklin stepped into the Cold Creek courthouse like he always did. Head high, tie perfect, untouchable, until he saw the cameras, until the microphones were shoved into his face. Judge Franklin, care to comment on the leaked documents connecting your office to abuse cover-ups? Judge, how do you respond to the claims that you personally blocked investigations? His face stiffened, no comment, but inside, panic churned. He rushed to his chambers, slamming the door shut. The news was everywhere, and at the center of it all, a public document leak timed precisely, anonymously uploaded, full of signed orders, redacted memos, and now unsealed testimonies from girls who were ignored. He picked up the phone, called the governor, no answer. He tried his political allies, silence, and then his secretary knocked softly. There's someone here to see you, she whispered. He opened the door. David stood there, suit, calm, silent, not with fists, but with proof. You're done, he said. Franklin tried to speak, failed. David slid a paper across the table, an affidavit. From Detective Carl Hayes. David leaned in. I could have destroyed you in the dark, but I wanted you to see the end of your empire in daylight. Cold Creek was different now. You could feel it in the air. Parents stood at school gates, not just waiting, but watching. Girls spoke openly in the halls. Teachers, new ones, hosted assemblies about truth, consent, and accountability. Sophia walked the hall without whispers trailing her. In fact, other girls smiled at her now. Some nodded, some stopped her just to say, thank you. She didn't want to be a symbol, but maybe she was becoming one. In art class, she painted again for real this time. Not just pain, but peace. A girl walking into the sun barefoot free. At home, she and David sat on the porch. Quiet. I don't know what to do now, she said honestly. You live, he replied. You live louder than they ever wanted you to. She looked up at him. Will it always hurt? David thought for a moment. Yeah, he said, but hurt isn't the end. It's just the scar that reminds you. You survived. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and together as the sun sank behind the trees, they listened to a town finally exhaling. But far beyond that calm, a final enemy stirred. And he wasn't done yet. The name came in through another anonymous tip. David sat in his study, the lamp casting long shadows across the stack of open folders. The email subject simply read, "You missed one." Attached was a single image. A banquet, a campaign fundraiser. David in uniform shaking hands with Governor Charles Easton. Beside him stood Judge Franklin, Sheriff Greaves, the mayor, all smiling. David zoomed in. Standing just behind them, arms crossed, no smile, wearing a security badge. Victor Lang, former military, now Chief of State Security. David's blood ran cold. Victor Lang was a name David knew from his own past and enforcer. Quiet, brutal, effective, the kind of man who never showed up in reports, but always to just off camera. The file attached confirmed it. Lang had been the muscle behind the silencing, paid to intimidate victims' families. Investigate whistleblowers, disappear the uncooperative, and the note at the end, Lang was watching you the whole time. He just didn't move because he was waiting. David stood. This wasn't over. It was coming for him now. That night, David drove 2 hours into the outskirts of Ridge County. Lang's property was listed under a false name, but Monroe confirmed it. Heavily fortified, security cameras everywhere. No neighbors within a mile. David parked a quarter-mile out, hiked through the brush in the dark. He didn't carry a weapon. Not this time. Lang wasn't a man to ambush. He was a man to confront. The house was blacked out, but David could feel it. The eyes, the silence, the waiting. He approached the porch, knocked twice. The door opened slowly. Lang stood in the frame, salt and pepper beard, eyes like flint. No fear, no surprise. "Took you long enough," he muttered. "I'm not here to threaten," David said. "I'm here to end it." Lang stepped aside. "Then come in. Let's talk like ghosts." Inside the place was bare, just walls, a table, a map pin with red dots. David saw Cold Creek, Fairview, Ashton Falls, circles drawn around schools. "How deep does it go?" he asked. Lang shrugged. "Deep enough to swallow good men, deep enough to turn monsters into martyrs." "And why are you still standing?" Lang turned. "Because you stayed alive." The two men stared at each other. Neither flinched. Not enemies, not allies, just relics of a war no one else dared to fight. They sat across from each other in silence. Lang poured 2 glasses of whiskey. David didn't touch his. "You were part of this," David said. "You helped them." "I helped no one. I enforced silence until the silence became louder than the crimes." "Why?" Lang finally met his eyes. "Because someone once did the same to my daughter. And I wasn't strong enough to stop it." David's breath caught. Lang continued, voice calm. "Hollow. I buried her, then bury the truth. And I thought if I became the darkness, I could control it. But you broke it." David didn't speak. Lang reached under the table and slid a flash drive across to him. "Everything I have, names, payments, proof. This is the final nail." "And what happens to you?" Lang gave a bitter half smile. "I was already dead. Ramirez. I just hadn't stopped breathing yet." David took the drive. "You're not forgiven," he said. "I'm not asking to be." David stood. "You do know they'll come for you now." Lang nodded. "Let them." As David walked out, he didn't look back because this war needed to end. And some men were choosing to burn with it. David sent the drive directly to Monroe. Within 2 hours, the Department of Justice locked down a half-dozen state buildings. Arrests were made in multiple counties. Internal staff, principals, counselors, even minor politicians tied to the laundering ring. The story hit national headlines. Whistleblower operation leads to widespread child protection scandal. Victim's father played central role in exposing cover-up. David's name wasn't mentioned at his request. He didn't want fame. He wanted finality. Sophia watched the coverage in silence, her hand lightly resting on the scar she used to hide. For the first time, she didn't feel like it defined her. It reminded her she was alive. They sat together that night. No words, just the soft glow of justice unfolding. But Sophia finally spoke. "Do you think we're safe now?" David looked at her and gave the only honest answer he could. "No," then gently, "but we're not afraid anymore." The air in Cold Creek felt different now. There were no sirens, no whispers, no glances over shoulders, just a strange quiet that only comes after a storm has passed. When people begin to look around and realize the world hasn't ended, but it's not the same. Sophia sat alone on the roof of the school, a place she'd never dared climb before. The sun warmed her face. Below her, the quad buzzed with life. Students laughing, eating, not pretending anymore. A new counselor had been hired, policies rewritten, cameras installed. Girls were speaking freely in class now, their voices steady. But it wasn't the system that made Sophia feel safe. It was the fact that she had survived it. She looked down at her sketchbook, flipping past the pages of rage, confusion, fear, until she reached the last one. A girl standing tall, casting a long shadow behind her. Her fists weren't clenched, her shoulders weren't hunched. She looked forward. Sophia titled it, "Still Here." She smiled to herself. For the first time, she didn't feel like a victim walking through fire. She felt like a survivor walking out of it. David sat in front of the mirror, shaving carefully. Every scar on his face had a story, but what he carried inside had no visible mark, only weight. He paused, water running, and looked himself in the eyes. He didn't see a killer, or a soldier, or even a hero. He saw a father, a man who had done what the world refused to. Sophia stepped into the doorway watching. "Do you still hear it?" she asked softly. He turned. "What?" "The screams, the video, all of it." He dried his hands. "Yeah, sometimes I hear it when it's silent, like it's waiting." She stepped closer. "Me too." David placed a hand on her shoulder. "But we don't carry it alone anymore." They stood in the hallway, not talking, not breaking, but sharing, because trauma doesn't leave clean. It doesn't vanish, but it becomes lighter when it's held together. He looked at her and finally asked, "What do you want to do now?" She smiled. "Live out loud and maybe help other girls who haven't found their voice yet." He nodded. "Then I'll walk with you as far as I can." David returned to the cemetery, just as the sun dipped behind the hills. He placed a new photo at Elena's grave, Sophia holding her sketchbook, laughing alive. He knelt and unfolded a letter. "Elena, I failed once. I missed what you tried to tell me. I was too angry, too proud. But I listened this time. I didn't know what justice looked like until I saw our daughter stand back up on her own. She's stronger than I'll ever be. You would be proud. I carry the pain of not seeing sooner. But I carry it with purpose now." He set the letter down gently. Then he whispered, "Rest now. I've got her." And for the first time in years, he left the graveyard with his shoulders just a little lighter. 2 weeks passed. Peace settled in like a visitor, unsure if it should stay. Then the phone rang. David picked up, expecting Monroe or one of the agencies, but it wasn't. It was a young woman, 19, from another town, another state. She said, "I saw the story. I saw Sophia's drawings. I need help." Her voice trembled. David didn't hesitate. "Tell me everything," she cried, paused, then began. David wrote every word. The war might have ended in Cold Creek, but for others, it was just beginning. He hung up the phone and called Sophia. "We've got work to do," he said. David stood in the hallway of their home, staring at the empty wall above the mantel. For weeks, he hadn't touched it. The old family photo, him, Sophia, and Elena, used to hang there, faded with time. But after everything, it didn't feel right. Not because they weren't still a family, but because that photo no longer told the whole story. Not anymore. He reached into his bag and pulled out a new frame. It held a photo of Sophia at her art exhibit last weekend, smiling, proud, surrounded by a circle of girls her age, many of whom had shared their stories publicly for the first time. On the wall behind them was her painting. Still here, David hung the frame on the hook, straightened it, stepped back. It didn't replace the past, it added to it. Sophia walked in, wiping her hands on a paint-smeared cloth. "You hung it up," she said, surprised. He nodded. "It belongs there." She walked to his side, looked up at it. Her voice softened. "It doesn't feel like we're just surviving anymore." David glanced at her. "We're not. We're living." That's louder than anything they tried to take from us. There were still scars, still weight, but now there was space for joy too. Not as a distraction from pain, but as proof they'd made it through together. A week later, David stood in a courtroom hallway, this time as a guest. He'd been asked to speak at a hearing for a bill inspired by their case, the Ramirez Act, a law requiring immediate investigation protocols in school assault claims and automatic federal review when local authorities fail. Monroe waited beside him, clutching her tablet. "You sure you want to say what you wrote?" she asked. David glanced down at the folded note in his hand. "It's not what people expect," she smirked. "That's exactly why you should say it." He walked to the podium when his name was called. The chamber was packed. Press, lawmakers, survivors. David unfolded the paper slowly. "I'm not here to talk about vengeance," he began. I'm here to talk about restraint, murmurs rippled. I had every reason to kill the men who hurt my daughter, every tool, every moment, and trust me, I imagined it. He looked up steady, but I didn't, because vengeance is loud and short. But justice, real justice, is what lies after you're gone. The room was silent, he continued, voice thick but clear. We have to build systems that protect the vulnerable before people like me are forced to pick up what those systems dropped. Applause came slowly, then louder. As he stepped down, Monroe touched his arm. You could have taken blood, she whispered. Instead, you gave people something that lasts longer. He didn't smile. But for the first time, he felt like he'd truly put the gun down, not just from his hands, but from his heart as well. The lake hadn't changed at all. Same still water, same crooked dock, same wind weaving through the trees like whispered memories. But David had changed completely. He stood at the edge, boots planted on the wood, hands buried in his jacket pockets. A year ago, he'd stood in this exact spot, consumed entirely by rage, lost, hollowed out, ready to burn the whole world down just to feel something real again. Now the storm had passed. Not disappeared completely, but settled quietly behind him. Footsteps approached. Sophia joined him without a word. She wore a soft blue hoodie, her sketchbook tucked under one arm. They stood together in silence. The quiet didn't ache anymore. I come here when it's too loud, she said. David nodded. I used to come here when it was too quiet. She smiled just slightly, then opened her sketchbook. Inside was a page, a brand new one. Her and her father standing side by side. A lake behind them, a sky above them, not dark, but rising upward. She held it out toward him. This is the last page. I saved it for now. David took it carefully, his eyes stinging. He traced the lines, the soft colors, the way she'd drawn him. Not broken, not burning, but standing tall. You're the reason I'm still here, she whispered. He shook his head. No, I just lit the match. You're the one who burned through the darkness. They watched the lake together a little longer. Then she asked, Do you think she sees us, Elena? Sophia nodded. David looked up at the wide sky above them. I hope so. I think she'd be proud. Sophia slipped her hand into his, and they stayed like that as the sun kissed the surface of the water, and the story behind them faded into something no longer terrifying, but sacred instead. They hadn't planned the speech. Sophia hadn't written anything down beforehand, but when she stood before the auditorium filled with survivors, parents, students, teachers, and strangers who'd traveled from across the country, she didn't tremble at all. She breathed in deeply, and she spoke. My name is Sofia Ramirez, and I was hurt, but I am not broken. The crowd leaned in closer. I lost my voice once. I thought no one would listen. I thought it would destroy me completely. She looked toward the front row, where her father sat, hands clasped tightly, eyes glassy with emotion. But someone fought for me. And now I fight for you. Because silence doesn't protect us. It buries us instead. She stepped forward, her voice sharpening now. To every girl who's been told to just get over it. To every survivor who was told they were lying. To every father who didn't know how to help. You are not alone. Applause rose slowly at first, then grew louder. She hadn't smiled yet. She finished with a whisper. And if they hurt you, and no one listened, I'm listening now. Tears fell throughout the crowd. Then came the full ovation. People stood, not just for her, but for everyone she had spoken for. Backstage, David hugged her like it was the very first time all over again. She pulled back and whispered, This time we didn't just survive. We actually changed something. David nodded, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't just rise, Sophia. You taught the entire world how to stand back up.